This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome in to another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On today's episode, I sit down with Rhode Island senatorial candidate Lenny Cioè. And Mr. Cioè, a member of the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, taking on Rhode Island Senate President Dominick Ruggerio in a Democratic primary this September. And I was there just a few months ago when Lenny announced his candidacy at the Rhode Island State House. Of course, just a few months ago, we also had President Ruggerio here on the Bartholomew Town Podcast. You can go and check that out. But interesting to sit with Lenny, sort of get his perspective, first of all, as a healthcare worker. He's a nurse, in general on politics, and then also go into sort of the nuances of his platform. And frankly, I asked him, how does he plan to beat the Senate president? I mean, that's a daunting task for anyone. Mr. Ruggerio has been a member of the, we'll say not only the political class, but a major political influencer for quite some time. So an uphill battle for anyone. We find out how Lenny Cioè plans to approach this, and also hear about how he is considered, at least by his peers within the Rhode Island Political Co-op, which is by and large a progressive organization, a grassroots organization. They have been in various forms, both here on the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I've had them on the radio when I've hosted on WPRO. Sort of a new organization that's pushing a progressive agenda. And more than anything, I guess the difference is they're promoting a statewide single banner, which many of their candidates are, or I guess all their candidates are running under. So amongst that peer group, Mr. Cioè says he is considered a moderate. So we'll get into all of that. Lots in store here on B-Town today, as we have every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks, as always, for spending part of your day right here in Bartholomew Town, which you can listen to wherever you like to get your pods, or, of course, at ripodcast.com. Support for the Bartholomew Town Podcast comes from Newport Vineyards, featuring Taproot Brewing Company.
Hi, my name is Kevin Beecham. I'm the head brewer here at Taproot Brewing Company in Middletown, Rhode Island. Started basically home brewing when I was 19 years old in my parents' kitchen, just messing around with different flavor profiles and ingredients. Pretty new to the state of Rhode Island and new to Newport especially, but really love it out here. It's a pretty awesome experience and really great to work with local producers and farmers, and in a small setting like Taproot Brewing where we can do, a lot of customized, unique recipes. So it's been a lot of fun.
Discover more at newportvineyards.com. All right, so in terms of the Rhode Island Political Co-op, you have come out essentially with one of the most, you don't want to rank the send in my way as elections or races or anything like that, but you have a very significant incumbent that you are challenging, that being the Senate President, Dominick Ruggerio, someone who is synonymous with the General Assembly at this point. He's been up there forever. He's obviously...
Since 1984.
1984, the year I was born. So here's a person who is a major lever of power in the state, not only within his district, but has much of the state's influencers around him, so to speak. What's your strategy, out of the gate?
My name is Lenny Cioè, and I'm running against the Senate President in District 4. My main strategy is just to work hard, door to door, meeting people, listening to them, and understanding that we live in a great state. It's just been neglected by the current legislators and the current Senate. I've lived and worked in this state my whole life, and I have yet to see a government that works for and by the people of Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. When I was 19, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It's a devastating disease, but I have a good family, and we stuck by my father, and we all worked hard to take care of him. The most devastating thing in that whole time period, those 30 years, was the cost of medications. They started at $1,000, and by the time my father passed, they were up to $2,000 a month. Can you imagine the stress on my father and mother trying to pay those medications? And on top of that, trying to take care of my father at the same time. That was my first motivation that something's got to change. I recently And now those same drugs are $3,000 to $4,000 a month, and that's with insurance. We have to do better for the people of Rhode Island. I recently went to a AARP meeting about prescription drug prices. I'm looking around. It's elderly people in wheelchairs, oxygen, walkers. And I mean, there was a wide group of older people. And they're talking about the hoops they have to jump through to get medication, how they have to fight with their insurance companies to get medication. Nothing's been done in the past 12 years. We need to change this. And as a state, we can do it.
Where does that begin at the state level?
All right. The current Senate president has used Medicaid as a piggy bank to subsidize the top 1%'s tax cuts. We need to start with Medicaid. We need to restore Medicaid to levels where it can be used by people. Medicaid affects low income, seniors, children with disability, adults with disability, foster children, ex-foster children up to their 26, and you're using them as a piggy bank to subsidize the top 1%. That's fundamentally wrong. And we need to change that. These people are the most vulnerable in our society. And we need to realize this. And by helping them, we help ourselves. Healthcare is an investment in every Rhode Islander.
So you come into this with a background as a nurse. From an interesting angle, we're seeing plenty of people now enter politics from the medical field. Congress, even there was a gubernatorial candidate in the last Rhode Island gubernatorial race that was a medical doctor. This angle is, it's such a critical issue, and yet it doesn't necessarily sit at the center of, on the national stage, necessarily everyone's platforms, maybe with the exception of Bernie Sanders at this point. How do you message with this? I mean, it obviously impacts everyone. It should be easy to do, but how do you get the electorate's attention on this particular issue?
Well, as a nurse, I watch people get denied every day, and I watch how the system works. And people feel it. The minute you enter the healthcare system, you start to feel the impact of what's missing. And that's how you address it. You listen to what people are saying to you. But again, we need to restore Medicaid. They want to cut Medicaid again from the governor's office. They want to cut Medicaid again. So now you're affecting a whole new group of people. Think about that. And think about the impact of that. Instead of these Rhode Islanders being able to go to a primary care physician and take care of a simple problem, they use the emergency room now they're going to have to use their emergency room as their health care provider, which is more expensive and costs more in the long run. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong, and we need to fundamentally change this. People will listen. All you have to do is listen to them, and that's how you approach the problem, and that's how you message it, and you listen to their problems. Recently, I was doing cold calls trying to meet voters, and I helped a gentleman who didn't know how to get to the hospital. He didn't realize there was medical Uber and a medical taxi. Sure. So I called him back, gave him the numbers. And to think about it, he was telling me his story, how his wife just passed away, and he needed to have surgery. But by listening to him, I got him the help that he needed. That's all we need to do is listen, and we get the Rhode Islanders the help that they need.
Outside of phone banking and things like that, and certainly the DIY approach that we're seeing from the DIY, I mean that with a ton of respect as someone who came out of that world as an artist, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And frankly, a broadcaster as well, but this notion of, very grassroots oriented, even the sign, which it has a feel of a very hands-on, not corporate, organization, the political co-op. Have you been able to, while waving that banner of the co-op, broaden your own name recognition and draw attention to yourself in the context of just, if people opened up a pack of Rhode Island Politico baseball cards, they'd be able to be like, oh, here's my Lenny card, here's my Ruggerio card, and know who both players are.
I'm getting name recognition now by being here, talking to you, going door to door. I plan to have events coming up. You can follow me on lennyforrhodeisland.com. That's my website, and you can follow me there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. But it's the door to door that's the most important. It's the absolute most important. Yeah. People need to meet me and see me and realize I'm there for them. They've been neglected so long, and this state has been neglected so long because all we're worried about is the top. And this trickle-down economics that the current leadership has adopted is not working. Look at our health, look at Medicare cuts, look at what's going on with our public schools, look at our roads, our infrastructure, everything, because they protect the top 1%.
Yeah, I think the next obvious thing to discuss here would be schools. I mean, obviously, you'd be representing a portion of Providence. Providence schools are a disgrace. There's no question about it. I think any other terminology, and frankly, other portions of the state are as well. We look at what's going on in Newport at Rogers, and there's Cranston East has challenges. It's all over. Providence in particular, though. It's just sad. I drive, when I go to White Electric, the cafe on Westminster, I drive by a couple of the schools. And, if I go at the right time, I'll see the after-school moment of kids just getting out of school, waiting to get picked up, waiting to go to the bus, waiting to go play sports, whatever. It just makes me so depressed and sad driving through there. They're going through the same experience I went through, you went through. Everybody has that after-school moment. But when you're in this landmine of a facility and just the way that the whole mentality surrounding Providence public schools have been for most of my lifetime of awareness. It's just sad. I feel like there needs to be more bully pulpit usage from the General Assembly on a regular basis, not just policy making, but just calling things out. Would you do that as a rep, or a senator?
As senator, I have a history with education. My father was a public school teacher at Pontiac High School, and rural parts of Rhode Island and urban schools have the same problems. It's always funding.
Yeah.
So, my father's argument when people used to talk to him about funding for education and why is it so expensive and why we got to pay the teachers so much, his answer was education is an investment in the future. And that's what our General Assembly has forgot. Education is an investment in the future, and we need to invest in education. He refuses to invest more money in education. And that's a fundamental part of Rhode Island. That's our future. The education should be adaptable to prepare these students for the jobs that we don't even know that are coming. And to watch and to watch what's going on. Schools are crumbling. A recent study by Johns Hopkins Institute for Learning, they left some of the interviewers left the schools crying because that's how bad the schools were.
Yeah, they said it was the worst they'd ever seen. Yeah, awful.
And why is that allowed? Why is this allowed under the watch of this current administration? Why? Is my biggest answer. Teachers are demoralized. Principals aren't allowed to run their schools. There's bullying. The buildings are falling apart. They're destroying the home. They're destroying Rhode Island's house, literally. It's neglect. It's pure neglect, and they own it. They own this.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
New episodes of the Bartholomew Town Podcast, Rhode Island's podcast of record, every Tuesday and Friday. Listen wherever you like to get your podcasts, whether that's Apple Pods, Spotify, Maybe you say, Alexa, play Bartholomew Town. Whatever it is, you can listen there. Of course, you can head over to bartholomewtown.com or ripodcast.com. And a great way that you, yes, you, can support the podcast is to simply leave a rating wherever you're listening. If you're on Apple and you just give the star, use your own judgment to determine the amount of stars you'd like to leave. You have that power right now, folks. Head over to wherever you rate podcasts on whichever interface you're on, if you feel like it, and give us a rating. It does help grow the Bartholomew Town podcast. The metric, I guess, someone I was with the other day, someone who's involved in education, sat down with me off record, and we was just talking about engagement, student engagement. That's a metric we don't even really have a way to measure formally. But thinking about what is the average kid in any district, particularly since we're on that discussion, Providence, when they wake up in the morning, are they psyched to go to school? I remember I was always miserable going to school until I entered the music program, until I started to get into AP history and found, all right, I'm there for this, everything else is just to get me to do what I want to do. But I couldn't imagine as a kid not having those areas to explore and just being through this, sort of mill of learning, for lack of a better way to put it.
For a short time, I was a school nurse on a bus. We used to take students to school with learning disabilities and handicaps. We used to take them to school. And then for a short time, I had to actually work in the school, making sure that they got in all right. And I realized at that time there was a huge problem. And
what year was this?
2009, roughly 2009, 2010.
Yep.
I'm not sure the dates. It was a short time.
Yeah,
It was
thereabouts.
about-
Not 1991 or something.
No. And there was a problem then. And then I got laid off. So the whole metric is everyone has to be involved. Parents, students, the legislature, the teachers, the principal. But the biggest thing is the funding. There's no, look at Mount Pleasant. Compare Mount Pleasant as as an example. I went to a football game. The school that they were playing had good uniforms.
Now you're speaking my language. Yep, keep going. Yeah,
they had good uniforms. Their uniforms were all different. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just that gives you school spirit. That gives you something that you're going to go for. When I went, I'm older than you, Bill, but I went to Cranston West in I graduated in 1977. I remember the school was loaded with programs, and it found a place for everybody. And every student had a place to go if they wanted to.
Yeah, take a look at old photos of Cranston West versus Cranston East at Cranston Stadium, that football game. I mean, what there is today is still energetic, but you see, that's why there's this post-World War II version of Cranston that my mom grew up in, my family grew up in, that you're speaking of, that the church was there and the market was there and the families were there and everyone went to the football game and this community existed. Well, that's, there's no better way to see economic disparity in Rhode Island than the Rhode Island Interscholastic League, which frankly is an outrageous sports league because they pit a LaSalle Academy up against, a Central Falls. Central Falls playing in front of the Wyatt Detention Center on a field barely lined with divots and garbage on it. They similarly have no uniforms or whatever it is against Barrington. They've got an arena practically with warm-up suits, zip pants that have their number and name on them. So, that's the problem.
That's why we need to change the tax structure. We need to take the top 1% and stop with the 5% flat tax. It's devastating the state. There's money lost there. I'm going to give you an example. When I teach patients about how to take their medications or how to do stuff, I use visuals. I'm going to give the people of Rhode Island my visual of our state right now. We have a crumbling foundation. We have walls that are falling in. So our home is looking dilapidated. But when you go to the roof is beautiful. because the top 1% is very well taken care of. But the rest of when the rain falls, we get very little. Now, let's rebuild Rhode Island in the vision that I would like it. Let's start with economic empowerment by creating a living wage.
15
with the cost of living increase at the end. At the same time, we need to do this simultaneously. Stop giving small business a better tax structure, because small business is the backbone of Rhode Island, and they've been neglected and they've been treated like they're large corporations when they're taxed, which is unfair.
So this is interesting because you're speaking to the common thread when we hear 15 an hour proposed in Rhode Island is, well, that's going to destroy small business. You're proposing a solution that both empowers those workers and preserves the ability of the business to sustain at its current earning level, potentially increase it because of some sort of variable that may benefit.
Just think about the tangible tax. If we lowered the tangible tax, small businesses could reinvest in themselves and reinvest in their workers.
Yep.
If we created a fair tax system for them, that they were allowed to be taxed and in steps instead of like they're a large entity, they would be able to grow. So now we're building a foundation. We're building a strong foundation. Reinvest in schools. Start rebuilding our schools. Reinvest in teachers. All right, now we have a strong foundation. Let's put the walls up. Let's reinvest in teachers again. Let's add Medicare. Let's reinvest in Medicare, bring that up, and start to include more people. We're 41st in the country when it comes to small business. And why? No affordable housing, no access to health care, and we have a complex tax structure that holds small businesses down. Let's get rid of that. Let's start actually investing in Rhode Island. People love things from Rhode Island. Let's build these walls. Let's get them strong. Let's give our students everything they need and make them stay here because they want to stay here. This is their home. Build these walls, make them nice and strong. And guess what? That roof will still be good because now that roof is sitting on a good, strong structure, and the top 1% will still be doing well.
Do you think that, I know the number thrown out had been something in excess of 10% as far as the taxation rate for that, upper 1%, quote unquote. Do you think that people by and large would stay in Rhode Island if the personal tax rate increased so substantially, or would they continue the migration to Florida, assets in Delaware? The world is flat. I agree that, you look back in that period we were just speaking of, Cranston, the boom of post-World War II, yes, corporate tax rates were much higher than now, but now in this modern world of, international accounting and mobility and flights and everything, do you think that we would be able to retain the roof here if that policy went forward even remotely as it's proposed?
I think they'd stay.
They're staying.
We have a lot to offer here. We're between Boston and New York, and it's shown that companies come to states that have good public schools, that have good transportation, that have a good, vibrant economy, which is small businesses. Companies, because now their workers are happy living here, they will stay. This fear that they're going to leave gives them more power, and it's fear that keeps the tax structure the way it is. There's nothing to be afraid of. We need to move forward because the tax system the way it is destroying our state. As a nurse, I watch it, I see it. And until you've looked in somebody's eyes and watched the fear that they have about paying their bills after their deductibles, it touches you, and there's no other way I can express it.
Last couple of minutes here, just a couple of quick questions on specific things. Tolls, truck tolls. Who knows what the heck's going to happen? Matty Yellow says when he's the speaker, there won't be cars tolled. I'm against tolls to begin with. I think that it's outrageous that there are tolls on the Newport Bridge. People are going to say, what a wacky position that is. I just think that, it's just one of those sort of barriers that I'm against collecting money that way for the state. I understand it also provides, the fiscal backbone for a lot of things. Where do you sit on that?
Tolls, every other state does it, so I guess we're just part of it. I don't with the. I just really feel that we really need to really look at our tax system itself overall,
including tolls as part of a tax.
Everything. We
Gotcha.
need to really look at the whole picture. It's my biggest thing right now is to create a fair tax system that includes everyone and doesn't exclude and doesn't put the burden on the middle and working middle class.
The middle working class, especially, I feel like that's where you see, somebody who's working multiple jobs, multiple side hustles, and they're unable to get ahead.
Here's my example of the minimum wage. I work with people at the hospital that I depend on. They clean the OR. They clean rooms upstairs. They all the laundry and everything. They barely make above the minimum wage, and they all work 2 jobs. All of them, one way or another, they're all working 2 jobs. If we make it a living wage, start at the bottom, it'll push their wages up, and now we're truly creating economic empowerment. Think about how it'll expand our economy. Think about how now we'll have even a greater source of revenue.
Yeah, no, there's no reason why someone who is a core portion of any system, education, I don't care if you're a bus monitor, if you're someone who's involved in, the linens at the hospital, if you're a core member of that team, you have to be paid enough to survive and thrive off of that job. Otherwise, that is the metric that proves that I don't care about the stock market. I don't care about anything else. That metric shows that there's something awry.
Yep. Think about it. It takes 2.5 times the minimum wage to rent an apartment.
Yeah.
2.5 times. And it's $11 now. And the average rent is $1,300.
Out of control.
Thank you.
Yeah. Totally out of control. No question about it.
And think about how it affects families and homeless children.
Yep.
It creates a homelessness that is unnecessary. We live in the United States and we have homeless people. We live in Rhode Island and you drive by Crossroads and you see families. It has to affect you at some point. And you can't drive by, and what gets me upset is sometimes people blame them. They're all working. That's the worst part about it. If you go actually and meet them, they're working.
Yeah. Oh, I know for a fact it's true. And here in our building, we have a couple of nonprofits that are involved in the homeless community, and they spend a ton of time supplementing people who are working, who maybe they have some kind of housing, maybe they're literally on the street, whatever it may be, but just basic needs like coats, bikes to get around, etc. There's a group in here that's what they do. And it's not, it's almost hard to believe that someone could go work a slave wage type of job at a restaurant while someone else is profiteering off of the results of that work. And then that person still can't come back and have their basic needs met. In some ways, it's almost working backwards from where we were when we started the United States.
It stopped upward mobility, and that's what's truly hurting us.
Yep.
And I come from immigrants, grandparents, and they worked hard, and they got paid, and then they put my father through school, and my father worked hard, and it was upward mobility. That has stopped, and that's the problem, and that's why we need to create economic empowerment again. Pay people living wages. It's a fundamental right. These people are working hard for you.
Yeah.
Give them what they need to survive. And think about it. Now they'll be able to afford housing. They'll be able to afford food. Their children will be able to have a place to live.
Yeah. basic documentation as well that gets, it's not cheap to have a driver's license, insurance, have all of your various paperwork, etc. I mean, for some people, it's nothing. For some people, that's a major investment, getting everything organized to make sure you're just quote unquote legal, not in terms of residency status, in terms of the requirements to exist in this world that we've built. So fascinating stuff. All right, last question. Here in Rhode Island, something I wrote an op-ed a couple of weeks ago. I've been hammering on this concept for a while that Republicans, progressives, independents, even Ken Block out on the moon or whatever. He's not on the moon. That's not what I mean. But in his own world, anyway, he's kind of in his own echo chamber that reaches a lot of people. But people who are, I guess, disruptors in this state, is there in your mind, because I see it, I'm not talking about pro-life, pro-choice, anything like that. I'm just talking about us versus them. The Rhode Island Political Co-op uses this term, the people. And Dan York, my colleague, I guess, at WPRO, pushed back on that notion at one point, and I started to think, you know what, I think that's, the people to me is broader than just progressives. It's anyone who is tired of the system. And that does include Republicans, independents, moderates, and so on and so forth. Are you willing, and you mentioned you're converting Republicans to independents so they can vote for you, but personally anyway, is the co-op and your campaign more so about challenging the establishment than about pushing specific policies?
It's a combination. And I believe that all of us together, we can rebuild Rhode Island. And it is going to take all of us. This is a huge problem. The state has been neglected. And because of neglect, we are where we are. And people are frustrated. And they're, and in some ways they're hurt. You're destroying their home. And I feel that the term "the people," I think it's all of us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, just recently, when the Filippo stood up to Mattiello,
Blake Filippi,
yep. Blake Filippi stood up to Mattiello.
Sure, the JCLS situation, the convention center issue
shows that this political machine that's dominated and had a stranglehold on this state needs to be stopped.
Right.
And I am here to do that. I am here to stand up to do the right thing, because there's a difference between right and wrong. And I am standing on the side of right this time.
That's the only way that, I think you can. Here in Rhode Island, it's kind of like you have two choices if you want to run for office, I guess, from my perspective. You can either just get into the system and either work your way up or become a sort of a phenomenon out of nowhere, or you become just a perpetual disruptor. And, we see the Moira Jane Walsh, we see in my opinion, Mike Chippendale on both opposite sides of the aisle, yet they both challenge notions. Certainly I don't agree with, oftentimes Republican ideas, but I love to see them in the chamber calling things out. And I think that's what we need more than anything else in Rhode Island,
I want to be more than an elected official. I want to be a civic leader.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to go. Mm-hmm. And that's what I stand for. Again, healthcare is an investment in every Rhode Island. Education is an investment in our future. And economic empowerment is the way we make the state stronger. And by being a civic leader and only taking my money from people of Rhode Island, not from corporate PACs and not from corporate lobbyists, I owe you to do the right thing. And you have the right to challenge me when I do something wrong. And that's truly where I want to go. I want to be a civic leader again. And that's what's missing here is civic leadership.
And I think in your case, in your specific race, it's going to be so much about turnout. We see that in Providence. Low turnout sometimes at some of these elections or mistakes. I think back to Terrence Hassett, former councilman. He went and got signatures in a building outside of his district. Next thing you know, Cat Kerwin wins the election because he didn't have his act together. So you can win this thing based on where you are right now, I mean, at least that's you really believe you're going to win this thing. This isn't just a campaign to raise awareness for the co-op. You are actually planning to defeat Dominick Ruggerio in September.
That's my goal. That is my goal. Why not? Why is everybody afraid to stand up to him?
Yep. As a nurse, I'm realizing that the policies and what's going forth is hurting the state over and over again. And I'm reaching out, and I'm finding that people out there want change. And I'm the change. I'm going to be the change agent. And yes, it's a big race. And yes, I'm taking on the Senate president. But why not? Why not? Why not me?
Remember daily social content on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Just search Bartholomew Town or Bill Bartholomew. Until next time, we'll talk soon.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.